I am Zara Whitfield, and I was 40 years old when I learned that no amount of success can protect you from a family that refuses to respect your boundaries. Before we go any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this help people who feel trapped between love and survival realize they're not alone, and your support truly means everything to me. That evening, I pulled into the long, curved driveway of my home in Silvercrest Hills, my shoulders stiff with exhaustion. I had just finished a 16-hour shift at Riverview Medical Center, where I worked as a senior trauma surgeon. It had been one of those days that followed you home, the kind that clung to your skin no matter how many times you washed your hands. 2 highway pileups. A stabbing victim who didn't make it. A child whose pulse I'd lost under my fingers while his mother screamed my name like I was God, and not just a woman in scrubs doing everything she could. All I wanted was silence. But the moment my headlights washed over the driveway, my chest tightened. A battered gray cargo van sat crookedly across the space where my car should have been. One tire was flat. Rust bloomed along the doors. Empty beer cans glittered near the bumper. That van did not belong here. My heart dropped so fast it felt like my body forgot how to breathe. I bought this house 8 months earlier for $1.6 million. Every dollar came from years of sacrifice, medical school loans, missed holidays, sleeping in call rooms, and choosing discipline when everyone else chose comfort. This wasn't just a house. It was my first real sense of safety. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. My instincts, honed by years of emergency medicine, were screaming that something was wrong. The front lights were on. I never left them on. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking too loudly in the quiet neighborhood. The gate was unlocked. My stomach sank further. I opened the front door. It swung inward without resistance. "Hello." My voice echoed off marble and glass. The alarm system was silent. I always set the alarm. Then I heard it. A crash. Followed by laughter, thick, sloppy, and familiar. My blood ran cold. I walked toward the living room and stopped dead. My brother Evan was sprawled across my white sectional sofa, his muddy boots pressed against my glass coffee table like he owned the place. Empty bottles littered the floor. One had rolled onto my imported rug, leaving a dark stain that made my eye twitch. He looked terrible. His hair was greasy, his beard uneven, his eyes red and unfocused. He'd aged in a way that had nothing to do with time and everything to do with choices. "Well, damn," he said, lifting a bottle toward me. "Look who finally came home." My hands started to shake. "What are you doing in my house?" I asked. He grinned, sloppy and unbothered. "Mom gave me your spare key. Said you wouldn't mind me staying for a bit." Something in my chest cracked. "No," I said. "That's not happening." He laughed. "Relax, Zara. Just until I get back on my feet. You've got plenty of room." Plenty of room. I had told my parents, clearly, firmly, repeatedly, that this could never happen. Evan had been drinking heavily since his late teens. Over the years, it had cost him jobs, relationships, apartments, and dignity. Every time he fell, my parents rushed in to soften the landing. Family helps family. I stopped helping 3 years ago. I called it survival. They called it betrayal. "You need to leave," I said, forcing my voice steady. Evan stood, swaying slightly. "Don't be dramatic." "This is my house," I said. "You don't have permission to be here." He scoffed. "We're blood. I don't need permission." That entitlement lit a fire in me. "Yes," I said quietly. "You do." His expression hardened. "You think you're better than me now? Big doctor. Big house." "I think you're trespassing," I replied. "You forgot where you came from." "I remember everything," I said. My phone buzzed. "Mom calling." I ignored it. "You have 1 hour," I said. "Then I'm calling the police." His confidence flickered. "You wouldn't." "Try me." He staggered down the hallway and slammed the guest room door. I heard furniture scraping as he pushed it against the frame. My phone rang again. "Dad." I answered. "Zara," he said gently. "Your mother is very upset. How did Evan get my spare key?" Silence. "You gave it to him," I said. "Well, your mother thought." "No," I cut in. "You don't get to think for me." They arrived 40 minutes later, using the emergency key I'd trusted them with. My mother's eyes were already red, mascara smeared. She launched into tears before I could say a word. "How could you do this to your own brother?" she demanded. "How could you violate my trust?" I shot back. "He's sick," she snapped. "You know that." "I'm a doctor," I said. "I know illness." I also know accountability. My father tried to calm things down like he always did. He just needs somewhere safe, he said. We can't handle his drinking right now. So you dropped him on me, I said. Without asking. You have space, my mother said simply. That sentence broke something in me. It's too much for you, I said, my voice cracking. But I'm supposed to handle it. She accused me of being cold. I accused her of favoritism. Evan emerged from the hallway, smirking. You making this all about you again? That was it. Get out, I said. All of you. They left. Evan didn't. He locked himself in the guest room. I cleaned the living room obsessively, trying to regain control. Bottle by bottle. Stain by stain. That's when I found the wallet. It wasn't his. Inside were multiple credit cards, different names. Fake IDs. Receipts totaling over $12,000. And a folded document that made my stomach drop. A warrant. 3 states. Felony charges. I checked my office. Files scattered. Lock broken. My laptop gone. I ran to my bedroom. Jewelry box open. Empty. My grandmother's bracelet. Gone. The ring my mother once entrusted me with. Gone. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You need to apologize to your brother. He's devastated. I stared at the message, then at the wreckage of my life. And I called the police. I stood in the center of my kitchen after ending the call with emergency services, my phone still warm in my hand, my heart beating so loudly it drowned out everything else. I had just crossed a line my family had spent my entire life telling me was forbidden. You don't call the police on your own blood. That belief had been drilled into me so deeply that even as I waited for officers to arrive, a wave of nausea rolled through me. My brother was upstairs, drunk, barricaded, and possibly dangerous. And still, part of me felt like the criminal. I hated that part of myself. I moved slowly, deliberately, locking myself in the pantry-sized laundry room near the garage, the only space in the house without glass walls. I slid down against the washer and wrapped my arms around my knees, breathing the way my therapist had taught me. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Name 5 things you can see. For you can touch. I could hear Evan upstairs, pacing. Mumbling. Occasionally shouting at no one. My phone buzzed again. My mother. Then my father. Then my aunt. I turned the phone face down on the tile floor. The doorbell rang. I flinched, then stood, smoothing my clothes with shaking hands. I opened the front door to find 2 officers on my porch. A woman with calm eyes and a man who looked barely older than a resident doctor. Ms. Whitfield, the woman asked. Yes. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Clark. You reported a burglary and trespassing. Yes, I said, stepping aside. And there's more. I led them inside, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the quiet. I showed them the living room first, the bottles, the cigarette burn, the damaged rug. Then my office, the broken lock, the missing laptop. Then my bedroom, where my jewelry box sat open like a wound. Officer Daniels' expression shifted as she took it all in. You said you know who did this? Yes, I said. My brother. He's upstairs. He's intoxicated. Is he armed? The question froze me. I don't know. Officer Daniels nodded once and stepped back, her hand moving toward her radio. She spoke in clipped, controlled codes I recognized from years of working around law enforcement at the hospital. Within minutes, backup arrived. Red and blue lights flooded my quiet street, reflecting off my neighbor's pristine windows. Doors opened. People gathered. Phones came out. I wrapped a blanket around myself without realizing someone had handed it to me. Officer Daniels returned, holding the wallet I'd found. These cards aren't in his name, she said. And this warrant, she exhaled slowly. This is serious. I didn't know, I whispered. My parents brought him here without telling me. You did the right thing calling us, she said gently. They knocked first. Evan Whitfield. Officer Daniels called out. Police. Open the door. Silence. They knocked again. Nothing. Then a shout from inside. I'm not going anywhere. This is my sister's house. I have permission. I shook my head firmly. He does not, I said. Officer Daniels turned back to the door. Mr. Whitfield, we have a felony warrant for your arrest. You need to come out now. Something crashed upstairs. My heart slammed against my ribs. Officers moved into position. 1 at the back of the house. 2 near the staircase. I was ushered outside onto the porch. My neighbor across the street, who had once complimented my landscaping, watched me with thinly veiled judgment. Someone whispered my name. The megaphone came out. Evan Whitfield. Officer Daniels' voice boomed. This is your final warning. Seconds stretched. Then the door upstairs creaked open. Evan appeared at the top of the staircase, his hands raised halfway, his eyes darting wildly. He looked smaller somehow, less powerful than he'd sounded an hour earlier. You really did it, he slurred, staring straight at me. You called them. You stole from me, I said, my voice carrying up the stairs. You broke into my office. You took my grandmother's bracelet. I was going to pay you back. With what? I asked. Stolen credit cards? His face crumpled for a moment. I'm scared, he said quietly. For a heartbeat, I saw the brother who used to walk me home from school. The boy who'd stood up to bullies for me. My throat tightened. I know, I said. But this is bigger than us now. He descended the stairs slowly. The cuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed through the house like a door slamming closed forever. As they searched him, they found more wallets. Pills. My spare checkbook. Officer Daniels held it up. These yours? Yes, I whispered. They led him outside. Evan twisted to look at me one last time, his eyes no longer pleading. They were furious. You're dead to me, he mouthed. They drove away. The house fell silent. My phone exploded. Calls. Messages. Voicemails. I drove to the station that night and gave a full statement. 2 hours of reliving everything. Itemizing my losses. Signing forms. When I mentioned my grandmother's bracelet, my composure finally broke. She raised me more than my parents did, I said through tears. That bracelet was hers. Officer Daniels slid a box of tissues toward me. We'll do everything we can, she said softly. I returned home after midnight. My parents were waiting on my porch. My mother stood the moment she saw me. How could you? She screamed. Your brother is in jail because of you. My brother is in jail because of his actions, I said flatly. You've always been cruel to him, she said. Always judging. Stop, I said, the word sharp as glass. I am done being blamed for his choices. If you turn your back on him, she said coldly, you turn your back on us. My father said nothing. As always, they left. I stood alone in my driveway, surrounded by silence and broken trust. The weeks that followed were brutal. Family members I barely remembered called to condemn me. Social media posts about loyalty and forgiveness appeared overnight. I was painted as cold, arrogant, heartless. I went to work every day and saved lives. Then I came home to a house that no longer felt safe. In therapy, I finally said the words out loud. I chose myself. My therapist nodded. And that terrified them. 6 months later, Evan took a plea deal. 3 years. Restitution he'd never fully pay. Mandatory treatment. Some things were never recovered. My parents never called. And slowly, painfully, I learned something I'd avoided my entire life. I wasn't the problem. I was just the first one brave enough to stop pretending. The silence that followed my brother's arrest did not feel peaceful at first. It felt loud, heavy, and unfinished, like a room after an argument where the words were still hanging in the air. My house, once my sanctuary, felt unfamiliar, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of woman would continue living inside its walls. For weeks, I slept with the lights on. I replaced every lock the very next morning. Then I replaced them again, upgrading to a commercial-grade system recommended by a former patient who owned a security company. Cameras went up. Motion sensors followed. I memorized every new code until they felt like muscle memory. Control was the only thing that steadied me. At work, nothing changed and everything did. I still scrubbed in. Still made split-second decisions that determined whether someone lived or died. Still stood in quiet rooms delivering words no one ever wanted to hear. But something inside me had shifted. I was sharper, calmer, less willing to absorb emotional chaos that wasn't mine to carry. At home, the grief arrived in waves. Not the clean grief people understand. Not the kind that comes with casseroles and sympathy cards. This was complicated grief. The kind that comes from realizing the people who were supposed to protect you never really did. My parents did not call. They did not ask if I was safe. They did not ask what was stolen. They did not ask how I was sleeping. Instead, extended family filled the silence. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years flooded my phone, heavy with judgment disguised as concern. Voicemails from cousins explaining why I was wrong. Why family was everything. Why forgiveness was mandatory. One uncle posted a long message online about children who forget their roots once money changes them. He didn't use my name. He He didn't need to. I read it once, then muted every family thread. The truth was quieter than the noise they made. Many of them already knew who my brother was. They just preferred that I absorb the damage instead of confronting it. That realization hurt more than anything else. 3 weeks after the arrest, I sat across from my therapist, Dr. Elaine Porter, a woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. I told her everything, the guilt, the relief, the shame, the moments where I still wanted to protect the version of my brother that no longer existed. "You're grieving 3 things at once," she said gently. "The brother you loved, the parents you hoped for, and the version of yourself who thought endurance was the same as love." I cried then. Deep, silent sobs that felt years overdue. "I keep thinking," I admitted. "What if I had tried harder?" She leaned forward slightly. "Tried harder than what? More money? More silence? More sacrifice?" I didn't answer, because the truth was clear. Trying harder would not have saved him. It would have destroyed me. 6 months later, the district attorney's office called to confirm the details of my brother's plea deal. 3 years in a minimum security facility. Mandatory addiction treatment. Financial restitution ordered, though everyone involved knew I would never see most of it. When the call ended, I sat alone in my office and stared at the wall. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That chapter, messy, painful, consuming, was finally closed. The house slowly became mine again. I painted every wall, choosing warm, grounding colors instead of the sterile whites the previous owner had loved. I replaced the furniture my brother had destroyed. I let go of anything that carried the residue of that night. Some things were never recovered. My grandmother's bracelet never resurfaced. Neither did the ring my mother had once entrusted me with. Those losses settled differently. They weren't just objects. They were symbols of trust misplaced and love mishandled. I mourned them quietly. I mourned my parents, too. I wrote them a letter once. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. I simply explained my boundaries and left the door open if they were ever ready to respect them. They never responded. The absence hurt less than I expected. Or maybe I had been hurting for so long that peace felt like relief instead of loss. What surprised me most were the calls that came later. A cousin who apologized through tears, admitting my brother had stolen from her years ago. An aunt who confessed she'd cut him off quietly, but stayed silent to keep peace with my parents. One by one, truths surfaced that confirmed what I'd always suspected. I wasn't the only one he'd hurt. I was just the first one who stopped hiding it. Spring arrived gently. I planted a garden in my backyard, tomatoes, basil, lavender, flowers that attracted butterflies. Every morning before work, I watered them, watching life take root in the space I had fought to protect. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it was honest. I still thought about my brother sometimes. About the boy who used to walk me home from school. About the way addiction hollowed him out and left someone I barely recognized. I didn't hate him, but I no longer confused compassion with permission. My parents remain strangers to me now. We pass birthdays in silence. Holidays come and go without calls or cards. I grieve that loss fully, and then I let it go. Family, I learned, is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by respect, by accountability, by safety. A year later, my house no longer felt like a crime scene or a battleground. It felt like a home again, quiet, strong, and entirely mine. I slept deeply. I laughed more. I stopped flinching at unexpected sounds. Most importantly, I stopped apologizing. I no longer explained myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. I no longer negotiated my boundaries. I no longer carried guilt that wasn't mine to hold. The hardest truth I learned was this: you cannot love someone into healing. You cannot sacrifice yourself into saving them. And choosing yourself does not make you cruel. It makes you alive. Some days, I still cry for the brother I lost long before the arrest. But I never regret protecting myself from the man he became. That is not betrayal. That is survival. And if this story reached you, if you're standing at the edge of a decision between loyalty and self-preservation, please hear this. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to lock the door. You are allowed to stop participating in someone else's destruction, even when that someone is family. Especially when that someone is family. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach people who need permission to choose themselves. And if this story helped you feel less alone, then it was worth telling.